Good morning, boys and girls. How are you today? I'm so glad I could make it out. Um, Forest is deep, and that cell signal just seems so weak at times. How are you today? Have you been having a good weekend? Well, it's the week now, and time for some more fun. Now, we haven't done our little washing song lately, so maybe we'll start with that. Are you ready? You know the one I'm talking about. So we need to wash our hands a lot. I think we should wash our hands all the time anyway. Well, not all the time, but whenever they're dirty or they can have something on it we don't want to spread around. So if you're playing outside, maybe you bumped into a little poison ivy leaf and got a little oil on your hands. It's a good thing to wash off too. When you're playing around outside, you don't have to worry about some things, but you have to think about other things. And washing your hand is one way to stay clean and not spread things. Because I hate it when people get poison ivy oil on their hands and then put it on a chair, an arm of a chair, and I sit down in that chair and there's oil on me and I don't even know it. Didn't see any poison ivy leaves around. So, wash your hands as often as you can. And here's my favorite song for doing that. So after you wet them and you put some soap on it and you start scrubbing around, you need to scrub well. Tops and bottoms, in between, wash each little finger, now they're clean. Right up to the elbows. Now they're clean. And just because you finished your song doesn't mean they're clean. No, you really have to scrub all those different parts. If you sing the whole song washing your little finger, the rest of your hand will not be clean. Now, come on. Doesn't that make sense? Hey, I was thinking we could go and do another story, like one of the Tal stories. When I was a little boy, my mom had a book. She bought it from the library sale. It was called Tal, Marvelous Adventures with Nooms and Noom. And she read that to the whole family. She'd read it, a chapter, each night until we had the whole book. Sometimes right after supper, and sometimes just before bed, and sometimes when we went camping, and sometimes when we stayed home, and sometimes at the beach. Well, wherever we were, it didn't really matter. We loved listening to my mom tell stories or read them. And so, I heard this story a lot. When my mom used to read the book, it started out being in really good condition, but we read it so many times over so many years that eventually the book just wore out. But the stories never did. I still remember them today. And these stories, I still share. And the book's been republished. It has. Lots of companies have done it over the years, and you can find it if you'd like. It's called Tal, and it's Marvelous Adventures with Nooms and Noom. And it's by, I'll remember that later. Besides, I'll put it in the notes on the beginning of it, so if your moms and dad want to borrow the book or find it in the library or buy it, they can do that. All right? Here we go, though. It's time for a story. Once, there was a toy maker, old Nifu. He lived in a village, and he made toys. And all the children loved him. Yes, they did. But where else would they get toys if they didn't get it from old Nifu, the toy maker? Every day, when the kids were out to play, and they wandered by the shop, they would look in the window, and there would be old Nifu working away, making or painting toys. And sometimes they'd go in and watch him. And they'd ask him questions, and he would tell them about the toys. Sometimes he'd tell them stories, and the toys would be characters in it. It always was a lot of fun, and the children loved old Nifu. Everyone loved old Nifu. He was just a very nice person. But for all that they loved him, they really didn't know him that well, because the only time anyone ever saw Nifu was when they went in his shop. He never seemed to leave. At the end of the day, when the shops closed, old Nifu, his door would shut, his door would lock, his light would go off, and then no one would see him again. Until the morning, when the light would come on, and the door would unlock, and then you'd come in or look in the window and you'd find Nifu sitting there making toys or painting them. And he made lots of toys, dolls and soldiers and boats and animals. He carved them or sewed them or carved and sewed them and painted them. He did all kinds of things and made lots of wonderful toys. Well, one year, not too much before Christmas, the children were out playing and they walked by Nifu's shop. And when they did, they saw Nifu sitting there, but he wasn't making toys or painting them. He was just sitting there, and his arm was all wrapped up in white bandages. One of the kids went inside. He said, Nifu, what happened to your arm? What happened to your arm? Did you fall down? Nifu said, my toys are a part of myself. Well, that kid did not know what Nifu was talking about. So he ran back outside and he told of his friends. He said, I asked him what was wrong, and he said, my toys are a part of myself. What does that mean? Well, the kids didn't know what it meant. So they ran home and asked their parents. And their parents didn't know what it meant. But people started to talk about it, and they said, that doesn't make any sense. Why, he must have gotten a fight. And whoever he fought with broke his arm. That's all that happened. Well, they looked around for someone that Nifu might have fought with. It certainly wouldn't have been one of them. Why, nobody in the village would ever hurt Nifu. Why would they do that? They might not get any toys. Well, they couldn't find anybody that Nifu would have fought with. And after a while, they stopped really thinking about it. And pretty soon they would have forgotten it altogether, except this man wanted to buy his son a toy. The boy's birthday was right before Christmas. It's always a hard time, isn't it? But when the man got to Nifu's shop, the lights weren't on. And he looked in the window and he couldn't see anything. He went back to the door and he knocked on it, and the door was not locked. It was ajar, and the door opened up, and so the man stepped in, and what did he find? But Nifu lying on the floor, all beaten and bruised. He called for some help, ran for the doctor. When the doctor came back, they made him comfortable, and as soon as he was able to talk again, they asked him, Nifu, who did this to you? Who beat you up? And Nifu said, my toys are a part of myself. Wow, there was an investigation that time. Who was this? What was going on here? Who could be beating up the toy maker? Well, they never found out. They asked Nifu over and over again, but his answer was always the same. My toys are a part of myself. That was tough. They tried to find out, but they couldn't find anything. What was Nifu talking about? Well, it was now just a week before Christmas, and they had a holiday, a big holiday. Nobody worked. The blacksmith let the fire go out in his forge. The tailor, why, he put down his sewing needle. And the butcher, not a single knife for him. No. He ate hamburgers instead. People were having a wonderful time. And when the holiday was over, of course, the parents all rushed over to Nifu's shop to buy some toys for their children. Christmas was coming really soon, and the light wasn't on. And the door was locked. And they all grumbled, what is Nifu thinking? He knows we always buy toys on this day. Well, he must be off having fun somewhere. We'll buy them tomorrow. But the next day, when they came to Nifu's shop, still the shop was dark and locked up. They thought, where is Nifu? But no one had seen him since before the holiday. They searched the whole town, did a house-to-house search, and they searched all the haystacks and everything else. They looked everywhere, but they couldn't find Nifu anywhere. And the days went on, and there were no toys for Christmas. Well, that was really hard on the children of the village. There was one little girl, she didn't live in the village. She lived downstream a bit. You know, there was a river that was running through the village, and it ran for miles and miles till it reached the ocean. And down that river a bit, there were some other people. Well, they used to buy their food in the village, and the girl went to school in the village, but they lived downstream, and that was because they didn't have enough money to live in the village. The mother and father, they had to build their house out of the things they had on hand, and so of course the little girl didn't have any toys, not real toys that you would buy. She only had the toys that she could make. But she still had fun. Remember I said she lived near the river? One of the things she did for fun was take sticks and use them for boats and send them sailing out into the river. And then she'd gather stones and there'd be bombs. Bombing the boat! Bombing the boat! It was lots of fun. She had a great time. One day she had a bunch of stones and she was bombing the boat! Bombing the boat! When she saw something floating down the river. She couldn't quite make out what it was, but it was floating and it might make a good boat. So she, instead of bombing the boat this time, she threw the rocks out past it. And as she did, the waves from where the rocks hit the water pushed the thing closer and closer and closer to her. And she ran down the bank and kept on going, and it got closer and closer and closer. And then as the river began to take a turn away from her, it just came right close to the shore. And she took a stick and she brought it on in. And when she pulled it out, you know what she found? You don't? Well, then I'll tell you. It was a doll. But this doll looked like someone had broken its arm off and the leg off and thrown it into the river. And she thought, oh my goodness, someone did not take care of their toy. I wonder if the arm and the leg are going to float down. And so she waited there. And over the course of the morning, the arm did float down. And then, just before lunch, the leg floated down. And with all the pieces, she was so excited, she ran home and showed it to her mother. Her mother said, oh, it's too bad Nifu's not around. He could have put this back together in no time. But the girl wasn't worried. She knew her dad could do something. He might not be a toy maker, but her dad knew how to put things together. And so when he got home, she asked him, and he did. He fixed the leg and the arm back onto the doll. It wasn't as good as Nifu would have done it, but it was good enough for her. Once the doll was put back together, that little girl, she set to work to make a beautiful dress out of some old handkerchiefs she had and an old sock that had a hole in it. Well, she just reused them. And she sewed and she stitched and she was very careful. And when she was done, her new doll had a new dress. And then she made a little bed for it. And that night when she went to sleep, she brought her doll with her. And she loved it. Now, an amazing thing is the next morning when people went out, what did they see but the lights on in Nifu's shop? So they ran there and the door was unlocked. They went inside and he was just sitting there. He wasn't even making any toys. They said, Nifu, where have you been? We had no toys for Christmas. Nifu, what were you thinking? And as Nifu turned to them, they saw a very, very sad look in his eye. And he said, my toys are a part of myself. Well, the people still did not understand what he meant by that. They said, Nifu, what the heck are you talking about? What does that mean? My toys are a part of myself. And Nifu said, if you didn't understand me the first time, I'm not sure you can understand me now. But bring all the children, and I'll answer the question. And so the people went out, and they gathered all the people in the village, and the people around the village, and all the children that went to school in that village came and listened to Nifu. And when they were sitting all around his shop, Nifu said, my toys are a part of myself. By that I mean, when I make a toy, I put myself into that toy. They're all me. And then, at night, when I shut down my shop, I become one of the toys. And so, if a child loves that toy, I feel the love. But one time, there was a little girl, and she got mad at her mother, and she broke the arm of her toy. And that's when you found me with my arm broken. For that night, I was in that toy, and my arm was broken by that little girl. And another time, a little boy, he didn't get his way. He didn't get what he wanted for supper that night, and he was so mad, he threw his toy on the ground and jumped up and down, smashing it. And unfortunately, that was the toy I was in that night, and that's why the next day you found me all beaten and bruised. But during the holidays, there was a little girl again. This one, she broke the arm and the leg off her doll, and she threw it in the river. I couldn't come back from that. Luckily, a child found me and fixed me and loved me. And so I'm here today, but I don't know that I'll make any more toys. For if you children can't take care of your toys, why? Them? And if I don't put myself into them, then there's no sense in me making them. Well, the children were horrified. They loved Nifu, and they loved his toys, and they promised they would never, ever, ever leave them on the floor lying around. They'd always take care of them and put them away when they were done with them. And so Nifu, he began making toys again, and he was careful who he sold them to. But you remember that little girl, the one who lived downstream? He let her pick out as many toys as she wanted from his shop, anytime she wanted. She was always very thoughtful and only picked out one or two, and didn't do it every day. But when Nifu finally left and passed on to the other worlds, he left his shop to that little girl, where he remembered how she had loved him once. And that's the story of the toy maker. One tale from the story of Tal and the marvelous adventures with Nooms and Noom. I hope you enjoyed it. That's a Fenimore Cooper story. I'm sure you'll find it. Au revoir, and I'll see you next time.